And we live. Welcome, guys. Thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having us, bud.
Always a pleasure, Jess.
So, some ground rules before we start. Let's just try not to talk over each other if there are opportunities where we could. Let's just keep it civil or not. Doesn't matter. So,
can we use words like direct to me?
Poo.
Yeah.
You get a quota of 3.
Okay.
3 times out of each of those words. So you got to use them wisely.
All right, fair enough.
Got a budget.
So, what do you guys want to start with? Flexible dieting, if it
Well,
fits
I
your
think we'll
macros.
just start off with a basic introduction to
Okay.
the layman that is obviously follows you, perhaps doesn't follow Dev or myself. A little about ourselves, our mantra,
Go ahead.
our positions. And I think we'll just shoot from the hip. We'll talk about, I think we'll talk briefly about politics. And then from there we'll move into IIFYM, flexible dieting, body positivity, which I think is quite a big topic of contention at the moment.
Yeah.
And then I will then proceed to school Dev on why the bodybuilders of the 80s and 90s were superior or are superior to the bodybuilders of today.
It's just nostalgic feelings, really.
And is that what you think you guys disagree most about?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, well then let's get started. Dev, do you want to introduce yourself maybe?
All right, so
What's your claim to fame?
claim to fame is debunking bullshit on Instagram, really. So I'm a strength and conditioning coach as well as a bodybuilding coach and as well as a bodybuilding competitor. And my aim with coaching is to basically teach people the most sustainable ways to do things and the ways that can follow through and change your entire lifestyle. So it's not as much as that you're following a diet, but you change your entire lifestyle so it actually becomes sustainable and you don't end up yo-yoing, you don't end up, gaining all this progress and then losing all of it and then having to start again. It's more about me teaching people to actually make the right decisions, to actually see what works and what doesn't for them, because everyone's different. And as well as teaching them the basics of lifting when it comes to compounds, when it comes to strength training, as well as bodybuilding.
Okay, great. Jack, if you want to do product placement, can you put it in camera's view? You can put it now, Jackie.
I actually put that down there.
Shout out to Nutricon though. They're coming on. Daniel and Wes are coming on next week.
Fantastic.
So, flexible dieting. Do you want to maybe give your definition of if it fits your macros? And then we can kind of delve into what you disagree, agree. So just because everyone might have actually a different definition of what it is.
Well, first of all, Dev's just introduced himself. I'll introduce myself.
Sorry, I thought you did.
Not
Everyone knows you though, bro.
Okay, so my name is Jack Lotter. I am a professional coach. I am the owner and founder of Sheriff Training Systems. And I specialize in competitive bodybuilding athletes, although I personally train a plethora of different people from all walks of life, from stay-at-home moms, lawyers, surgeons, entrepreneurs, bankers, the works. I basically manage my athletes' expectations and those that follow me, that bodybuilding is not about pandering to what you feel you want to do. It's not necessarily the healthiest of endeavors by any stretch of the imagination, but I rather lay the foundation and the path of what is required from a physiological viewpoint to get not just over the finish line, because I don't believe in participation trophies, but actually leaving with noteworthy silverware. And that's a very brief elevator pitch into what I do.
Okay, and you both have been doing what you do for quite some time.
Yeah. So, I've been coaching for about the past 6 years now.
Okay.
Yeah, STS has been around for 6 years. I've been a professional coach for probably about 8 or 9 years.
Okay. Well, enough of the stuff that people don't care about. People want to see us argue. That's what they're here for. So, guys, Jack, do you want to start off with your definition of what and how you define if it fits your macros?
So there are a lot of different dieting dogmas in the fitness industry. You've got the Banting zealots, you've got the carnivore zealots, you've got the vegan zealots. And I feel that every single one of these these dieting strategies do have merit. Okay, there's a lot of, some of it does have science. It's not just pseudoscience. But I feel that if anyone follows any specific dogma in a cult-like fashion, whether omitting certain micronutrients and macronutrients, or, you know, sort of cordoning themselves off in a particular direction, they're not going to get the very best results. And what I mean by the very best results is what I touched on earlier. It's about getting IFBB pro cards. It's about getting WBFF pro cards. It's about coming first and second, winning your division, winning overalls. Not just, you know, standing on stage and getting a high five because you think you're lean, but you're not lean. So, so IIFYM, you know, before we proceed, that I'll make it very, very clear that calorific totals, macronutrient totals, are unequivocally and irrefutably the most important part of any dieting plan that you follow. Whether you're a vegan, whether you're on a deficit or you're on a surplus or you're doing a body recomposition, the calorific totals and the macronutrient breakdown thereof is the single most important part of the process. But that doesn't mean that it is the only process. Okay, and if you are an indiscriminate IIFYM zealot, you don't take into account fiber, you don't take into account your EPA and DHA constituencies, you don't take into account the amino acid constituencies of food, which are very, very important.
Can I stop you?
Yes.
Just for your definition, not to, you know, go into detail of how you agree or disagree. So now just your definition, so just so we can see how you define it.
So when it comes to if it fits your macros, I don't particularly like that term because people have associated that term with Pop-Tarts. I mean, if you look at any of Lane Norton's posts, he rips those people to part because they're the Pop-Tart revolution. So everyone has this idea that if it fits your macros means you can eat cake, you can eat KFC every day, you can do all of that. However, it still follows the fundamentals of filling out your macronutrient needs. Now, for a lifestyle client, I think it works brilliantly because it allows them that flexibility to, you know, have 80% stuck on a plan, but 20% where they can actually start to substitute things in and out. And it's only really effective, like Jack said, where people are omitting, say, your EPA, DHA, fat content and things like that, is it's only really effective if you're actually focusing on those. And I find it beneficial anyway for lifestyle clients because how many of those people are doing that for their normal diet? They're not. So if now you've taken their normal diet where they're eating far too much or far too little, and you work out their calories and they actually start eating the right amounts of calories, they'll start to make progress. And then from there, you can get more specific because the average person doesn't need to worry about their amino content in their food. They probably don't. They don't need to worry about, you know, their nutrient timing being so on point. They're not in the elite athlete class. So as much as it would benefit them more, I think having the ability to decide, okay, listen, I really don't feel like chicken and rice today. Let me go have a chicken wrap. You know, let me substitute my extra lean mince with sweet potato at dinner for, I don't know, oven fries with an ostrich steak or something like that. I just believe that it gives people the opportunity to not be stuck in a monotonous cycle, which some of us thrive upon. I mean, Jack will know this, lots of competitive athletes, Jesse, you'll know this, is when there's a set plan and every day is the exact same thing, that almost helps you with that routine and it's much easier to stick to for some people. However, others need the ability to not be too bored of their food. I mean, I think that's something that holds the whole population back, is not being able to stick to a set plan. And so I find that if it fits your macros is a way to break away from that, but still restrict the amount of calories you're getting in. So it's a much more controlled way of basically being in control of your calorie deficit.
Personally, I think, you know, it's not the loose term where it's, I've got 50 grams of carbs tonight, I'm going to allow myself to have a Pop-Tart. For me, it's, I'm having however many grams of carbs is 50 grams. I need to find something that's got the same amount of fiber, the same amount of this and that, so that it's the same thing.
Correct.
So in terms of protein, if I'm supposed to have chicken, but I can allow myself, I'd rather actually have mince, I'd rather have ostrich. That doesn't mean I'm going to go get my protein from a protein bar. So it's very different. That's my term, is flexible in terms of I've got a list of 6 protein sources. I can have any one of those, but it's not.
Yeah.
I didn't really eat it. I've got 1,000 calories. Then we get a burger.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that's where people get it wrong, is that they assume that, oh, anything can fit my macros. I've got 3,000 calories for the day. I don't know, a Big Mac meal's 2,500. I'm going to have that and then just chicken for the rest. That's not how it works. You can break it down further from, instead of focusing just on your calories, then you break it down obviously to focusing on your macronutrient targets. But then again, you add fiber into that, because that's one of the major downfalls, is that you end up not getting as much fiber as you need. You end up not getting the micronutrients like Jack listed. So if you keep it to about 80% full compliance on whole foods, mainly vegetables, mainly your animal protein sources like chicken, game meat, beef, extra lean mince, eggs, all of that, all the wholesome foods, you're definitely going to be getting in those micronutrients.
And you? What do you think in terms of, like, how flexible would you allow a client to be? Let's say they're a lifestyle.
Let me just address what the two of you guys said. I think it's a bit of a straw man, because Dev identified himself as a strength and conditioning and bodybuilding specialist. And with respect, like I said, pandering to, if you want to enter the bodybuilding realm and you want to get any form of inkling of success, true success, okay, not just your participation trophy, then unfortunately you're going to have to resign yourself to the fact that your eating is going to be mundane.
Yeah.
It's not going to be catered for your comfort. It's going to be catered for speciality. It's going to be catered for recovery. It's going to be catered for hypertrophy and performance. And if you don't like that form of lifestyle, then bodybuilding is not for you. So I think, again, you're preaching to the choir with regards to the merits of having a more flexible approach for your average lifestyle client, or those people that are not really interested in attaining the highest levels of excellence in their respective sports. And some coaches cater for mediocrity, some coaches cater for excellence. Obviously, there's a difference in those two things. So don't disagree with anything that Dave said, albeit that, my biggest qualm is that 9 grams of trans fat is not the same as 9 grams of high omega-3. And, a protein source is not just a protein source. You have to look at the biological value thereof. The reason why amino acid constituencies are so important, not for the client, for the coach, that's why they're paying you that fee, is because you need a certain amount of leucine and essential amino acids to spike protein synthesis. You need a certain amount of biological value to render a certain amount of results, notwithstanding the fact that certain proteins react differently with certain people. Some people are lactose intolerant. They can't have whey protein. They can't have milk protein. Some people have very adverse reactions to soy protein. 10 grams of soy protein, I can assure you, is not the same as 10 grams of hydrolyzed whey isolate. So, different strokes. I'm not bashing James Smith. I'm not bashing people that cater for Gen Pop. But with respect to Dev, we're sitting here and he's identified himself as a strength and conditioning specialist. He's identified himself as a bodybuilding specialist, which is fine. So let's talk about the merits of bodybuilding. Let's talk about sheer, irrefutable excellence in performance, because that's what we're discussing. And if you are giving a competitor 5 or 6 different options based on their preference, you're going about it the wrong way. Yeah. Because nothing grows in comfort zones. And I know that my clients come to me because they want the very best results and are willing to do whatever it takes to get there. Not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily mean how much, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm willing to take, what am I willing to take? There's a very big difference between PEDs, which we'll touch on in due course, but it means whatever it takes. And that means being very uncomfortable. That means the monotony of perpetual routines and dieting habits. But having said that, that's also not an excuse for a chicken and broccoli and rice diet 6 times a day by any stretch of the imagination. That's the antithesis to a diet based on performance excellence.
If I can just add to that, is I was watching a podcast with Lane Norton, Joe Rogan, and Dom D'Agostino, and now Lane was explaining his applications of if it fits your macros within a bodybuilding context. And obviously it becomes a lot tighter if it comes into your contest prep. And there, like Jack says, you have to be meticulous with the sources of protein that you choose, with your nutrient timing, with everything like that. However, for in an off season, Lane was talking about one of his clients that he had who came to him, and in his off season he had to eat 7,000 calories a day to grow. That was his activity level. That was how much energy he needed to grow. And he was trying to get that in by eating chicken, rice, oats, broccoli, all of that 6 times a day. Yet nothing was happening. He said he hadn't gone to the bathroom for 2 weeks, and he was bloated he was completely full of shit basically. And Lane said, well, you're eating this much fiber per day, of course you're going to be blocked up like that. Let's rather focus on more calorie dense foods. And they started adding, I wouldn't say junk food, but things with chocolate in them, and things that are flavored with more sugar, and things that are flavored with this, and higher fat content foods instead of just getting olive oil in a protein shake or something like that. And basically lowering the total volume of food, but having the same macronutrients, having the same total calories, and all those problems went away. All the digestive issues went away, everything like that. So it can allow you to get in a lot more calorie dense food with a lot less volume in certain contexts. Obviously, for in a full prep, it needs to be a little bit more monotonous like that. And you can't have preferences. You can't say, I don't feel like doing half an hour of cardio, I'm rather going to do this. Or, I don't feel like eating my fish today. Or when it comes to a contest prep, you have to knuckle down and just do it. So I wouldn't implement it in a competitor's contest prep situation. I more look at it for my lifestyle clients, and when guys are in their off season, when they have the opportunity to actually enjoy their food a little bit more. This doesn't mean that if you have, 300 calories, go have 2 Castle Lights. It means if you have 300 calories that need to come from carbohydrates, rather add that to one of your meals to fill you up a bit more. Or you can have something a little bit nice to suit a craving or something like that.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting that you bring up Lane Norton, and then shortly thereafter you use anecdotal experiences of his clients.
Well, that was just, it was one thing.
Look, I'm not bashing it. I think it's very interesting. Anecdotal and empirical evidence is still evidence.
100%.
It may not be the most ideal form of evidence, clinical based or meta-analysis and so on and so forth, but Lane Norton is the first person to bash other coaches based on their empirical evidence, because a coach will say, well, I don't necessarily believe the clinical findings because look at what my athletes have done. And Devin has then just gone, well, he hasn't really mentioned any clinical data or anything. He said, well, look at the results of one of his clients, which I don't think should be undermined in any stretch of the imagination. I think that that's very interesting. But if you are going to look at the anecdotal and empirical evidence, particularly in the South African bodybuilding industry, and in terms of the placings of the athletes, who are the bodybuilding superstars that are following these IIFYM more flexible leaning protocols that are raking up these pro cards and doing exceptionally well? Because no disrespect to Lane, I'm also a fan. There's certain things that I disagree with, but he's not a Milo Sarchev. He's not a John Meadows, and his if you were to compare athlete repertoires, you can't even begin to compare the silverware in a bodybuilding sense. Not necessarily saying that what Lane is saying is incorrect. I just think that a lot of the time, you have to pick your viewpoint. Are you saying that evidence-based? Well, sorry, are you saying that clinical studies and meta-analysis and things like that is the be-all and end-all? That's fine. That's your stance. You can't flip-flop and then bash other people for doing that, and then all of a sudden use an empirical account of one of your own athletes' progress when you've basically bashed every single coach for doing the same. The difference is that coach's athletes have pro cards and overall trophies and yours don't.
Well, I don't think that it was just anecdotal evidence that he was just saying, listen, let's try this and let's see if it works. He was using evidence from studies that he has conducted over his whole career to make the decision to change to that. And to make the decision that, oh, listen, more calorie dense foods, because we know from X, Y, and Z studies that when calories are equated, weight loss is no different or weight gain is no different. So he basically used all the evidence that he's gathered and basically put that on this oak, put it into his plan, and there you go, they saw the results. He just used the findings from that to explain his theories more.
Yeah, sure. And I'm not bashing that either. But, in the same vein, you could say that Milos used clinical studies in addition to his own understanding and experience, 20, 30 years in the industry to make
Fair
up,
enough.
to present his clients as his respective case studies. So, I just, and again, off season, you're preaching to the choir. I'm the first person to advocate a mass gain. I'm the first person to advocate multiple cheats or refeeds during the course of the week. But the biggest, most overlooked aspect in this industry, and Devin touched on it earlier, is the mental aspect. It's the preparation. 99.9% of the time, a competitor is not getting the utmost results. It's because they're not compliant. They are not accountable to themselves. They have piss poor discipline. And they are not taking responsibility for their own goals. As coaches, it's not our job to be their minder or their headmaster or their headmistress, but we need to provide that accountability and keep someone on track. When you give someone a plan, it's like it gives you a sense of security, knowing that these are the walls or parameters by which I can move with. And that structure will in turn both directly and inadvertently lead to success. What do I mean by that? Well, if I were to tell you, Jesse, these are your calories for tomorrow, chances are you're going to go to bed thinking, well, I'll just try and operate within those calories or that calorific framework during the course of the day. Whereas someone who has a more regimented structure would have prepped his meals for the following day. He would have put his head on his pillow with a sense of pride, feeling that he's accomplished something before he's even gone to bed, before he's even woken up the next day. That has a carryover effect that's very, very important. And life may happen for Jesse. Touch wood, you may have a flat tire. You can't get to this place. You can't get to that place. Before you know it, you're at the end of the day. You haven't hit your macronutrient totals. Your peri-workout nutrition has become an absolute fuck show. You're trying to get the calories in. You're loading a lot of calories in one particular sitting. And we know, as a result of perpetual clinical evidence, that multiple protein feedings during the course of the day is far superior to one big protein feeding at the end of the day. That's why gastric emptying and nutrient timing, things like that, is a lot more important than I'm going to say Lane Norton zealots, not Lane Norton, but the people that use him as a basis to push their garbage agenda. And that's stuff that we need to, you need to take into an account. So someone's got a diet, they're prepping their foods, they're far more likely to be compliant. So, someone like a Lane Norton or, his Kirsty Baxter, I think that's the name of his wife. Holly Baxter, sorry.
His girlfriend.
Girlfriend, okay. They have an unbelievably fantastic education on the subjects, and I think they themselves are great anecdotal cases for what they tout, which is very important. But they have the ability to be flexible. Because they are disciplined. They are accountable. Most of the people that come to me, in my experience, lack that discipline for me to give them a diet and say, these are the parameters by which you can move. I just think that it's a recipe for success before you even started.
I also think that, and it's something Lane touches on often, is that the most effective diet for you is the one you can stick to. And I mean, Jack, you'll know this having worked with lifestyle clients, is that total compliance equals total results, basically. If you've 20% compliance to a plan, you can expect 20% results, if not less. Okay, and that's the issue when it comes to general well-being of people and wanting to lose weight. Instead of gaining all that weight back and instead of restricting things, I find that if it fits your macros and flexible dieting is the easiest way to put yourself in a deficit or to put a client in a deficit without causing massive restriction. So for some people, keto works brilliantly because for some people, they don't need that reward of having carbs. They don't crave carbohydrates. They prefer eating fattier foods. They like the moderate protein intake, but they don't rely on carbs. And it also comes down to the emotional aspect that lots of people are emotionally attached to food. Lots and lots and lots of people cannot go without eating carbohydrates because
99% of the population.
Exactly.
Definitely.
So you put someone like that on a keto diet for 12 weeks. Okay. Let's say they're 100% compliant for those 12 weeks. They make huge changes to their physique. However, the data has shown that, I think it was in the World's Biggest Loser, that 95% of the people put on the amount of weight that they lost in the 3 months following that. Okay. In the year following those 3 months, 85% of those people had put on a further amount of weight that they had lost. And that's just because once they had quit the program, they were no longer compliant. Whereas, and you can't ever be in a deficit forever. You can't. You would starve yourself to death by definition. So finding the diet that you can put yourself in a deficit for the longest period of time, bring yourself back up to maintenance calories, even a little bit further to reverse diet yourself, and then come back down again. If it fits your macros is probably the least restrictive in terms of that, because you aren't cutting out any major food groups. You're not putting this massive restriction on yourself other than just eating less.
But I don't think if it fits your macros will work for anyone unless they've done the strict dieting. Because no one off the street coming up for their first diet is going to be able to, have the flexibility and the options and then be able to stick and, rein themselves in.
Or even the knowledge to know what to choose. And I mean, that's where people like myself, Jack, other coaches come in, is to actually educate you on that. That's what I pride myself on with lifestyle clients, is that I don't expect them to be with me for years and years and years on end. Is I don't want clients to be with me for years and years, because that means that I haven't taught them anything. I have lots of people who are clients for 3-4 months, and after that they're like, Dev, do you mind if you just send me my macros? I think I've got the hang of this. And I check in and I say, cool, what have you eaten this week? Send me your MyFitnessPal tracking. Let me see what you've eaten this week. Let me review it. If there are a few too many things where I was like, you could have had a few more vegetables this day, or you could have had that. Or,
but these are people that don't ever compete.
Yeah, these are pure lifestyle clients. When it comes to my competitive athletes, that's when it is a set plan, and that's when the only things that will be substituted would be a refeed meal. That's it.
Yeah, again, I think it's just two trails of thought here. I mean, we're conflating lifestyle athletes with bodybuilding athletes. Again, we just need to go back to the drawing board and say what we've identified ourselves as in terms of the respective niches that we provide in a professional capacity. So I agree with most of what you said there. I disagree with what you said with regards to client retention and client turnover. I've had some clients for 6 or 7 years, and it's not because I have to mollycoddle them. It's because, again, I'm adding that accountability. I'm adding the coaching aspect of coaching, okay, which is pushing someone, motivating them, providing them, being a bastion of strength when they need that, being a sounding board, for clients that have terminal illnesses, clients that have lost children, clients that have going through divorces, and so on and so forth. I think that there's a coaching aspect that extends way beyond your caloric totals at the end of every day. So yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with what Dave's saying. I just like I said, I think the greatest, most important part of one's diet, protocol, whatever they follow, is their calorific totals. Their macronutrients are the most important part of the process. And again, if someone can be 80% compliant with that, they will get results. But people don't come to me specifically, and I'm speaking for myself and for the clients that I coach, because they want results. They want the very best. They want to know what would be the ideal food for me to consume before I train to assist with gastrointestinal flushing, vasodilation, glycogen replenishment, cell hyperemia, and so on and so forth. And I'll sit down and I will calculate the macros based on their specificity, in addition to the foods that would be ideal for them, and then make changes based on their anecdotal experiences. Some people work very well on pineapple before, after training. Some people prefer papaya. Some people don't like that at all. And, again, a good example would be someone like Sibu, who absolutely loathes sushi. But we have found that when we carb him up on sushi from an aesthetic perspective, which we can't really measure in a clinical or a meta-analysis, that's based on subjective judging in the bodybuilding capacity. Sibu looks 100% better when he carbs up on sushi than when he carbs up on pizza. I didn't write those rules for his physiology. That's what we've just managed to ascertain. And that's not from 3 or 4 months worth of coaching. That's from 5-6 years worth of coaching and finding what foods work best for him from an aesthetic perspective. And the only measurable we have there, unfortunately, is subjective.
Would it not be, just in the case of Sibs, for example, would it not be, because I know I've seen, you've shown me things in his peak week, things that he carbs up on, and would it not be more beneficial for you guys to look at like a cleaner approach to it? And I'm not criticizing anything you're doing, but would it not be easier to, because going to a restaurant, for example, every restaurant is different on their portion size. You can't accurately see how many grams of carbs, what the sodium content is, what the fat content is.
But if I can stop you there, Devin, in the peak week, I don't count macros at all. In peak week, I go exclusively on how someone looks, because on game day, they're going to be judged 100%. On their aesthetics.
But I mean, if you look
at I'll eyeball it to a huge degree. I'm sitting with Sibu, he's still looking flat. I'll say, order a cheesecake. Yeah. If I feel that he's spilling to a degree, I'll say, cool, cut back on your next meal. I have to make decisions on the fly, and unfortunately, the only tool that I have to do that is my own subjective experience.
Because my only issue with that is the fact that when you've been in a deficit for, let's say he's prepped for 16 weeks, your body is not more anabolic because you're starving. Your BMR has reduced itself so far that any extra food you're getting in is more subject to fat gain. And if you look at the research behind that, is when you're in a starving state, your body, and I mean you'll know this being basic thermodynamics, is that your body wants to be as efficient as possible. So it doesn't want to carry 300 kilos of muscle. It doesn't want to be 3% body fat. It doesn't want to be all of those things. And that is why your BMR slows down. That's why all of those processes slow down. Your NEAT slows down, everything. So when you get in exorbitant amounts of calories, as soon as that pushes you into a surplus and fat gain becomes a lot more prominent, hence rebounds and all, do you not find that maybe he might spill and it might cause a tiny bit of extra fat gain, or has that never been a problem with it?
Well, again, like I say, if you're not assessing, you're guessing. So I do eyeball it, but up until the final weeks, all of my athletes do a 6-week biokinetic assessment where we evaluate A, in terms of their circumference measurements, B, in terms of their muscle mass and their lean mass, which obviously is inclusive of water, and their body fat disposition. And despite the fact that they're on a deficit for a long time, I find that guys, particularly the more muscular bodybuilders, have a much higher propensity to store glycogen than your average run-of-the-mill person. And generally, you have a lot more leeway in terms of when someone's been on a deficit for a long time. If the risk of giving them too many calories, chances are that their bodies will apportion that to the replenishment of glycogen before putting on body fat.
But if those excess calories are coming in the form of triglycerides and fats, that's not going to be broken. Say someone, example A, his BMR is 2,000 calories, or his TDEE at the end of his contest prep is 2,000 calories. Okay, let's say he gets in that day, he goes and has a massive refeed, a whole ton of sushi, and he has 700 grams of carbs, and that pushes into his maintenance. What happens to that extra fat that he gets? That's not going to be broken down and turned to glycogen. That's already in fat basically form. It's going to be stored as that. I mean, if he's getting in all of a sudden a surplus now, that fat's not just going to pass through him. It's not going to be stored as glycogen. It's going to go to adipose tissue.
I think, again, that'll only happen if someone's not lean enough. Okay, I think if someone's not at a point where, and again, I'm not touting this as the beacon of health, but when someone is at single-digit body fat, like I said, the chances are their body is going to prioritize the replenishment of glycogen over body fat, unless you are egregiously irresponsible with their caloric loading that week.
But that's also why you will test, prior to actual peak week, how their body responds, so that
100%.
you know how to do it.
That's why I give cheat meals. That's why I give refeeds. It's not for the mental aspect or, giving, trying to take the foot off the throttle. I'd like to see how their body responds to that. Do they look better or not? So you may be able to argue that they might have put on a little bit of body fat in that week or not. I'll disagree. But, I'll say if you've done it correctly, I'll disagree. But also your training is also very, very important. You've got to train in such a way that we do our very best to manipulate the body as best as we possibly can, so that the idea is that the body will partition the nutrients more in the way that we want them to do it than not. For example, fasted cardio. We know that fasted cardio is ineffective for fat burning. Okay, well, not ineffective. It's It's not, let's rather say it's not more effective than fed cardio. But
Not a fat burning
we
tool.
also know that fasted cardio is very good for increasing insulin sensitivity. We also know that fasted cardio is more effective for glycogen depletion. Important when trying to manipulate one's glycogen reserves. We also know, both from the anecdotal experience of athletes for decades, but also in clinical studies, that when you severely and drastically decrease someone's glycogen reserves, the glycogen supercompensation thereafter is 120, 130% more than it was prior to that period. So their ability and propensity to store more carbohydrates in that period is greatly elevated, and a smart coach and an experienced coach will know how to take advantage of that as best as possible, so that the athletes look better on stage. And the problem that we have with bodybuilding is that this is not an exact science. That's why they are bodybuilding coaches. That's why they are bodybuilding gurus. Because if it was a case of 1 + 1 = 2, I wouldn't have a career. Yeah. Dev wouldn't be a bodybuilding specialist, and people would just download their plans off the net and they'd follow it. You've got to eyeball it to a huge degree, and also, notwithstanding what that specific athlete may be going through in their personal capacity. Maybe their dog died that week. Their body's not going to respond the same way it did historically, and that's why you've got to use the experience and the wisdom of a coach to make those necessary revisions for you. And that doesn't mean throwing all of the data out of the window and all of the clinical studies and meta-analysis done, particularly in the last decade. You use that 110% and use your own experience as a coach to make what you feel be the right call. Sometimes I've got it egregiously wrong. And it's not because I don't know what I'm doing or because I didn't look at the science. The science means absolutely fuck all if you don't know how to read that science and make correct judgment calls based on that science and based on how your athletes respond to that specific science. For example, you might find that some of your athletes respond better to occlusion training. Yeah. Some of your athletes respond better to heavy duty training like Dorian Yates and Mike Mensa did. Everyone has their respective niches. I don't want to be a jack of all trades, but as I said,
no pun intended.
Yeah, as I said earlier when I was discussing diet protocols, I think all of these things have merits. The best coaches will sit there and cherry pick what they feel makes the most sense, what the science supports the most, and as always, the most important thing, what has got them to the position that has created champions and pro card winners and overall winners and so on and so forth.
And I mean, just with that is using the science to decide what would work is, Jack, I don't know what your views are putting on someone on a keto diet for a contest prep, for example. But for someone that might work because say they work long hours and they need better mental clarity throughout the day. And I mean, you can look at the research that supports that having higher ketone content helps with brain function. And so for them, that would be great. But I know for myself, I've tried keto. I prepped on it for 6 weeks and I nearly died because I couldn't deal with the emotional connection that I had to carbohydrates at the time. I just craved it too much.
Dropping to 13% body fat must have been very difficult for you, Dave.
It was around 6. So over those 6 weeks, about 1.5% a week.
It was the first dig. I was waiting for it.
I thought this is far too. You're going to try and spice this up a little bit.
Okay, so let's just say that flexible dieting, we can all agree, someone who doesn't care about competing and someone that doesn't want to compete, but someone that wants to be healthy, relatively healthy.
Let me stop you there. Okay. I think it can most definitely have merit to a lifestyle client. And I wouldn't say that I give clients free reign.
No, not free reign.
But, you wouldn't be able to define my diet as flexible. It's flexible more in the sense that people have a huge variety of foods to choose from. Well, not choose from. They're obviously given or apportioned by me. It's very flexible when comparing it to your chicken and broccoli. Yeah. I give my clients refeed meals. I give them Milo cereal, wine gums. I was one of the first people in the country ages ago to be having Coke and wine gums post-workout.
Everyone followed that.
Okay, so there has to be. All my clients eat lots of fruit. People are fruit's bad for you and this and that, and they have different types of carbohydrate. I think that's very important for adherence. But I think handing the reins over to your clients, particularly lifestyle clients, is the antithesis to why they've come to you in the first place.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
also, I mean, for example, what I do with my lifestyle clients, if I give them the option of, do you want to follow the set plan, or here's my ebook that I've written, and it's a complete guide to flexible dieting in my own words, and I send that to them, and it's a 3-4 page booklet where it explains all the different things and things you need to focus on and things you need to forget about. And obviously in the beginning, if a client comes to me, I can't just say from the get-go, oh, just stick to these calories. Obviously, to learn more about their body, learn what they respond to, I do follow through with the set plan. But once they have the idea of it, I send them off my book and they can read through it. If they don't understand it, cool, I'll still build everything. Otherwise, it gives them the option and the opportunity to make their life more interesting.
Okay, well then, I mean, we all kind of in an agreement, let's be honest. But obviously, you aren't going to write an ebook and say, okay, you guys have, choose a list of these green foods, which are fine. The list of food. No.
So I think where Devin and I differ is that I've got a very FIFO mentality, which is an acronym for fit in or fuck off. And some people will gravitate toward me because that's exactly what they feel they need and they want. And a lot of people will move away from me because they think that's the antithesis and to what they're looking for, and that's also fine. The bottom line is I coach my clients the way that I feel I'd like to be coached and what I feel has worked for me historically and what has got the silverware in the STS stable that we've managed to accumulate over the last 6 years.
So let's just go off this because, I mean, it's already 41 minutes. We haven't even gotten to the second topic.
Okay.
So going on.
So let's talk about this whole new body positivity bullshit in the industry. Let's talk about this whole pseudo kindness wave that's in the industry. Jesse, I pointed out to you this week that you've had a couple people on your show this week that proclaim themselves as bastions of health and nobility and wellness and kindness, and that couldn't be further from the truth. You got someone sitting here.
I pick them all, bro.
Yeah, someone sitting here talking about health, and they following their weekend jaw. The authorities are having to check their coke for blood on a Monday morning, and then they're talking about how unhealthy it is to follow a diet plan and how unhealthy androgens are, but you use them in superfluous quantities. People that I have prepped historically, some of the biggest issues of contentions I had is that these people didn't want to go off the PEDs when I insisted, and it caused massive issues of contention in our coaching relationship. Same people that are touting health and wellness are, schnaufing lines of cocaine and doing dwellings at music festivals. It's the hypocrisy of it drives me up the fucking wall.
Someone criticized me 2 weeks ago saying, oh, you're a bodybuilder, you must take steroids, that's so unhealthy. While they had a guai in their hand and they were chain smoking the whole afternoon. It's like, really?
Yeah, so what's with this body positivity push at the moment, Dave? What are your personal thoughts on it? What are your thoughts on the panda issue, the Donovan Truth issue?
Okay, I need to go live for this one now.
Okay, so first of all, I think he was an absolute doers for talking the way he did. I get his point and I understand what he was trying to say. The way he carried it out was completely wrong. I don't agree with what he was saying at all, but I also don't agree with the promotion of being overweight, being obese, being healthy. Because, I mean, if you look at people's visceral fat, if you look at brown fat storage, if you look at all of those around your organs, chances are if you are 130 kilos, yet you don't have muscle, you don't work out, you don't live an active lifestyle, chances are that the fat content in your body is not the healthiest, and that your blood lipids are way off, and that you're putting yourself at risk for all this plethora of diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, everything like that. So promoting that it's okay to be overweight and all of that, 100%. I have no issue if you want to be overweight, if you want to be obese, if you want to tell me that you think that's beautiful, 100%. I have no disagreement with that. But don't try and tell me that it's healthier than what I'm doing. Okay, I know that being a competitive bodybuilder isn't healthy, but don't tell me that, oh no, just because you're overweight doesn't mean you're unhealthy. That's what I disagree with. If someone wants to be overweight, if they're happy with that, as long as they're not hurting me, as long as they're not irritating me or anything or telling me I'm wrong, you go and do what you want to do. It's your life. I have no opinion on your life. I have no reason or no, objective in that. But don't preach that it's okay and healthy. That's my issue with it.
Yeah, I think you raised on it there, Dev. I mean, my biggest pet hate is when bodybuilders conflate what they do as being a bastion of health, nobility.
The complete opposite.
It's the antithesis. Bodybuilding is not healthy by any stretch of the imagination. Right. It is extremely unhealthy. But in the same vein, people mustn't be so narcissistic as to presume that putting themselves out there they are not going to be met with the occasional disdain and the occasional critique. Body positivity means, body positivity should mean also, being honest with ourselves and prepping ourselves in a mental capacity to deal with the adversity we are going to face if we put ourselves out there. You don't see the industry going in uproar or furor when people are telling my female bodybuilding athletes or bikini athletes how masculine they look or how ugly they are, or taking swings at Sibu because he's got such a small dick. It's exhausting, but Sibu doesn't cry about it. No. He doesn't demand that there has to be socio-economic reform to pander for him. He deals with it. If you put yourself out there, you need to resign yourself to the fact that you are going to, very often, probably more often than not, be met with critique that's not going to align with what you would like. When just on that, if I go out there, if we go back to the Donovan issue, I didn't actually watch the whole thing. I was just sent snippets of it. You could argue, first of all, the big elephant in the room is that people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones.
Yeah, and he was fat.
Okay,
that's why I said
maybe not necessarily, but I mean, you're not necessarily sitting there as the bastion of bodybuilding physical specimen. That's number one. Number two, he's entitled to his opinion. But in the same vein, he's also entitled to deal with the ramifications of his actions, and he needs to do that like a man. And that doesn't mean sitting down and giving a half-assed apology, an insincere apology that the people that were offended by it are going to laugh off and ignore, and the people that actually maybe agreed with his viewpoint are just going to look at look at
him like a wet fish, saying, "Oh well,
exactly,
you fell apart."
So the body positivity movement.
I completely agree with what you said. Where I think it was on Instagram or Facebook or something, where you said, "Listen, if you're going to make a statement like that, stick to your guns."
That's it.
I completely agree with that.
But, live by the sword, die by the sword. Exactly. You said something. Deal with the ramifications of it like a man.
So we now all want to preach. Everyone should have freedom of speech. Everyone should be able to say what they want. But the way he said that. Is the amount
people should have the freedom to tell them what they think of his opinion?
Yes. No, of course. But you can't. If we say freedom of speech, then we can't say he's not allowed to do that.
No, 100%. But
absolutely. He's more than entitled to do that. But in the same vein, he's entitled to deal with the ramifications of what he said.
And I mean, you and I spoke about this last night. Is that have your opinion? Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. However, if you have a racist opinion, if you have a sexist opinion, if you have any disrespectful, blatantly disrespectful opinion, that is going to be met with a harsh reaction. And especially in today's times with social media. I mean, he posted that at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or something. 20 minutes later, Instagram had blocked it, and I had seen it 5 times on Facebook. Things... They spread so
But quickly. Then how do you feel about that? How a cancel culture when everyone's preaching freedom of speech, but then everything's cancelled?
Everyone likes freedom of speech until someone says something that doesn't align with your viewpoint.
And there's that as well. Is that also people are so quick that if you disagree with them, and it's an emotional immaturity here. If for example, Jack and I shared different views on one point, I'm not going to sit there and just argue, only believing my point and saying, oh no, this is what I believe, I don't care what you have to say. I'll listen to what you have to say. You are highly educated in very many areas, so I'll listen to your viewpoint, I'll take it in, and I'll think, do I agree with that? I'm willing to learn, but do I agree with that, yes or no? Whereas 98% of the population, they listen to react. They're just there to, oh no, this offended me, I need to blow off, I need to go. Instead of actually, and 99% of Facebook arguments would be completely irrelevant if instead of just blatantly disagreeing, you actually listen to the person's view and say, cool, what can I take from this? and this and this. Actually, no, this isn't something I want to listen to. You know, I'll stick to my views, but I feel like you can't go into a debate closed-minded, wanting to only fight your opinion, only having your views, and that's not a debate. That's just a blatant argument, and that's, I think, a very
I think the big, I don't like that cancel culture at all, and I think one of the biggest problems facing us with regards to social media is the fact that people are saying that we can't have a civil conversation based on our innate characteristics.
Absolutely.
You know, this whole thing, well, oh no, you can't talk to me about racism because you're white. I don't necessarily think that's fair. It's like saying that, you know, I can't coach a paraplegic person because I'm not paralyzed.
Yeah.
It's like saying that you can't have a male gynecologist because he doesn't have a vagina. You know, I think that the most important thing is that we as human beings should try and strive for, you know, it should be the search for the commonality that we have with one another to try and help us, you know, move forward and grow as a species or as a society. You know, that, and cancel culture falls in that. You know, someone just says, you know, oh, you're not a woman, you can't speak for them, or sorry, or, you know, you're not a woman, you can't have an opinion on women's rights, and I think that that's weak to a degree. And like I said, you know, in essence, in order to move forward, we all need to sit down, we need to try and draw as many parallels as we possibly can and find commonality, find common ground. And social media, unfortunately, is the antithesis to that as well, which is why I've gone off Facebook completely. Because like Dave said, people are not interested in listening to understand. They're listening to reply.
And it's just stressful.
100%. It's and a lot of these issues are not going to find resolution when the you know, the inherent shouting point is, you don't know me, so don't have this conversation with me, and then but I'm going to proceed to shout at you.
I mean, it's ironic though, because all these people that are shouting are ones that kind of want everyone to be accepted and everyone to be included, but then they're excluding the people who have different views than them. So it's a contradictory argument.
100%.
I also find that, I mean, some of the most productive and some of the best debates, arguments, or whatever you'd like to call them, that I've had on Facebook are with people with completely different views to me, and things that I've learned the most of. And that comes from not just completely blatantly arguing. I mean, even Null, for one, him on Facebook, he's a very intelligent man, and we have different viewpoints on certain things. And I remember he commented on one of my posts disagreeing with me, and then someone else got involved, and he messaged me, and he's like, dude, let's just rather talk about this in a message. I don't want other, you know, fucktards to get involved and skew what I'm trying to say or something. And I learned a lot, and that comes from listening, and my viewpoints changed as a result. However, 99% of the people out there don't have the ability to do that because they're driven by emotion and they're driven by anger and, oh no, this has made me angry, I need to fight for it. Not, I need to sit and debate.
And these bastions of inclusivity are pushing people further and further away from them.
Exactly. 100%.
Then what is the solution though? Because I don't think there is a solution.
Currently, I'd have to agree with you, Jesse. I think, you know, I've become more and more withdrawn. It didn't matter how many arguments I had on Facebook, whether I felt that I had won that argument or not, it would just be replaced by another zealot trying to push their own agenda. And it's just exhausting. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I had Vele, like, he was here yesterday, person of color, come, and we were talking, and he was like, it was actually Sasha asked him, do you ever think like in South Africa this racism issue is going to be ended? And he was like, obviously I hope it does, it's been a big issue. But I was thinking, like, innately in human nature, there's always something you disagree with. Yeah. And I'm not saying that obviously racism is...
Winston Churchill said it's differences of opinion that make for great horse races.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
And since the dawn of time, there's been people of different races who don't get along. There's been people that do get along with people of different races. There's been people that don't agree with, are homophobic. There's been people that don't agree with us. And I think for the rest of our lives and for the rest of humankind, there are going to be people 100%. That disagree with different things, and there are going to be people that do. And unfortunately now people that disagree can just be more vocal on social media and argue more.
Look, I think the most important element is the fact that, you know, the three of us are coaches. It's the absolute antithesis to what we do to nurture victim mentality in any way, means or form. We do our very best to teach people to take self-accountability, self-reliance, self-dependence, self-responsibility. And I feel that a lot of these subsects in a lot of different spheres in society are having this fight to see who can have the greatest oppression and the greatest victimhood and wear it like it's some sort of proverbial badge of honor. And I find it repulsive. You know, people are being rewarded for having,